Despite losing the U.S. election, President Donald Trump did receive more than 70 million votes and tightened the race in part by getting more minority votes than in 2016, especially among the Latino or Hispanic population. VOA's Brian Padden reports on how this growing population is also becoming more politically diverse. Take a look.
The increase nationally in the Hispanic vote for President Donald Trump from 28% in 2016 to 32% this year, according to exit polls, surprised many experts.
I think that we've got to, going forward, really disaggregate that Latino vote. It is not a vote.
Many analysts assume the president's harsh anti-immigrant rhetoric and policies, in particular separating migrant children from their families at the U.S. border with Mexico, would create a groundswell of support for Democratic rival Joe Biden among Latinos. Some, however, in the overwhelmingly Catholic or conservative Christian Hispanic electorate supported Trump and the Republican Party for their opposition to gay marriage and abortion.
Being pro-life was primarily one of the biggest reasons I voted for Donald Trump.
Some fiscally conservative Hispanics also like Trump's efforts to cut taxes and regulations while discounting the Democrats' repeated promises to increase wages and expand access to health care.
We Latinos believe that no matter what they say, offering the moon and the stars, they will not keep their promises.
A surge of Latino support helped Trump win Florida with over 51% of the vote, defying some pre-election polls that had Biden ahead. Analysts say Trump's efforts to label Democrats as socialists, as well as his tough policies opposing communist Cuba and Venezuela's socialist leader Nicolas Maduro, helped solidify his support within the fiercely anti-communist Cuban-American community in Miami. Some Latino advocates say Biden neglected Florida, while Trump held multiple rallies in this state, which his campaign thought would play a pivotal role in this election.
You know, Biden really was kind of late to the party.
Increased Latino support in Texas helped Trump win decisively in another state that was supposed to be close. However, Hispanic support helped Biden become the projected winner in part by flipping Arizona and gaining a lead in Georgia, two states that voted for Trump in 2016.
There isn't a state now where we're not relevant.
The growing Latino population in the U.S. is becoming increasingly diverse, analysts say, and is one the Democrats cannot take for granted. Brian Padden, VOA News, Washington.
And with that, we come back to Patsy Widakuswara to dig deeper on the issue of minority votes in the United States. Patsy, there is this notion that in the United States, the Democratic Party is the party that is seen as more friendly to minorities. Has it always been like that, or is it changing now?
Well, it really depends on which part of period that we look at, right? I mean, we do remember that back in the beginning of the creation of this country, Abraham Lincoln, who was the president who emancipated the slaves, was from the Republican Party. But if we look at the more recent history, it is the Democratic Party that really supported the civil rights movement. Of course, this was the movement that gave equality under the law for African Americans and other minorities. And so this kind of history really became the backdrop of their attachment of minorities to the Democratic Party, as well as policies enacted by the parties or administrations under Democratic presidents that gives all sorts of, affirmative actions and other protections under the law, and not just racial minorities, but also other minorities, including LGBTQ as well as women. So that has been the history. But as you can see from Brian Padden's report, that may be changing a little bit in terms of the last election. We see that President Trump is enjoying more support from minority, particularly minority men, not just Latino men, but also Black African-American men. And so this is following with the overall trend that more men support President Trump than women. So these are some really interesting demographic trends that we are observing in the American political system.
All right. Conversely, also tell us why white working class Americans are very much drawn to President Trump with his brand of populism and nationalism. How does this issue of race play out in American politics?
Yeah, so we have seen this. Seen this sentiment since the first election of President Donald Trump. in 2016 and also in 2020, we hear a lot about this notion of white grievance, right? The fact that even though white, particularly non-college educated white and white male, feel that they are aggrieved, feel that they are under attack. So in a sense, this phenomenon is, certainly something that the president has used to his political advantage, saying that he's the only one that will listen to them and he's the only one that would fight for their interests. In some ways, I do see some sort of similar elements as to the Hindu nationalism and populism movement in India. So in terms of numbers, we can see that the whites, particularly non-college educated whites in rural areas of the United States, overwhelmingly vote for President Trump, as well as white Christian evangelicals. So if the question is whether race plays a part in American politics, certainly in the 2016 election, as well as the 2020 election, it does play a role, particularly during the 2020 election. We see a lot of Black Lives Matter movement and both candidates taking their position on both sides of the issue.
All right. Okay, Patsy, thank you so much for joining us with your insights.